Welcome everyone to the fourth edition of the Nabanna Earth Weekend or the new festival in Shantiniketan. And we have the privilege today of being able to bring to you the historian, Professor Romila Thapar, who is going to talk to us today about enduring democracy. Now, it falls to me to introduce somebody like Ramila. She remains one of the most highly respected historians we have of our Indian history. Romila Thapar is Professor Emerita of History at Jawaharlal Nehru University. She has been the General President of the Indian History Congress 1983. She is a Fellow of the British Academy and the American Philosophical Society. She is the author of major studies of early Indian history. Professor Thapar holds honorary degrees from Calcutta, Oxford, and Chicago universities, amongst others. She was awarded the Kluge, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, probably not, Prize in 2008. And this is a prize that honors achievements in disciplines not covered by the Nobel Prize. More than, as I said before, more than this sort of long list of honors, and I haven't even begun to list the books that have been published by her. It is really the scholarship and the integrity of the historical discipline that she upholds that is most admired, and that is why she is a household name as far as history goes in India. Firstly, thank you, Romila Thapar, for joining us today and for agreeing to this talk. And may I now invite you to please begin your talk on enduring democracy.
Thank you very much indeed, Anjum. I'm very grateful for this invitation and the chance to speak. Thank you also for your very generous introduction. Quite undeserved, but nevertheless appreciated greatly. And let me just say that I feel a bit diffident about speaking about contemporary times, since my specialization in history, of course, is at the other extreme. I'm happiest, as I always say, when I'm talking about the BCs rather than the present. Nevertheless, the present is very strongly in our midst, and therefore I thought I would accept this invitation and just give you some of my thoughts about what I think is significant of our present times. We shall soon be celebrating 75 years as an independent nation. This is the moment to pause and consider whether we have achieved what we set out to achieve at the time of independence in 1947. That was the point at which we converted ourselves from being a colony of the British colonial empire to becoming a free nation state. India was no longer a collection of kingdoms as it had been before it was colonized, nor were the people of India any longer subjects of the British Crown. We were now a sovereign democratic state whose population consisted of free and autonomous citizens subject to none. Secular nationalism had resulted in the bringing together of Indians in the demand for freedom, the most momentous change in our history. The kind of state and society that we wanted was a democratic, secular nation state. This was embedded in the Constitution that was agreed upon by all, and the acceptance of which we remember and celebrate on Republic Day. The question today is whether the structure envisaged by the Constitution has been put into practice and made foundational to the nation. The Constitution is what every government swears to uphold. But we have to ask, what of it is being upheld? This is a crucial question because the Constitution, if respected, can be a substantial protection for us from attempts to deny the democratic and secular structure of our state and our society. What does the Constitution require of us, and to what extent do we abide by it? It requires three essentials: that we be a democratic nation state, that we guard against attempts to weaken our democratic functioning, that we give authority to three basic institutions to protect our democratic functioning, namely the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. These are the agencies through which democracy is practiced. Therefore, their autonomy has to be ensured. When attempts are made to deny this autonomy, such attempts are an insult to the Constitution. The question we have to ask is whether in our 75 years of freedom, we have ensured the autonomy of these institutions. That of the legislature began with the decree that there should be adult franchise, a remarkable act of foresight and courage by the Nehru government. It enabled us to be a democracy. Legislation was extensively debated in both the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha before being passed. Representing the views of citizens in the process of governance was new to our history. For as long as people are subjects, they are recipients of government orders. But when they mutate into citizens, then they have a say in what is to be ordered and why. Over the years, this aspect has undergone change. The formal procedure of one person, one vote continues, but it is accompanied by a variety of rather opaque arrangements at different levels between candidates and political parties, as well as the crossing over of defectors on the eve of elections. Defectors may be entertaining for some people, but they seriously damage the democratic structure of the polity. By defecting, they are also insulting the people who elected them, because they were elected to represent a particular party, but subsequently they join another party and represent another point of view. We should also inquire into why the financial outlays on elections of each party increase enormously with every election. If, as citizens, we know the answer, then why don't we object to this erosion of democracy? It is now becoming routine to rush bills through both houses, almost like a formality and without much debate, whether slight or substantial. This again demands correction. The executive, and more specifically the administrative services and the police, have been the steel frame of all state systems since the start of the state in India centuries ago. Early texts discussing the state, such as the Kautilya Shastra, which is always quoted, have mentioned its 7 limbs as the ruler, the ministers or administration, the force to protect sovereignty, the collection of taxes to fill the treasury, friendly allies, fortifications, and control over territory. From the Mauryas to the Cholas and the Mughals, the emphasis in practice was on maintaining a force, on adequate finance, and on a reasonable administration. Ashok Maurya was remarkable because he proclaimed that his governance linked to executive functions was directed to the well-being of his subjects, which he held as primary. Most other rulers whom we hold up as role models, be they the Guptas, the Cholas, the Mughals, made few specific references to this fundamental question of the well-being of the citizens. Yet, routine governance rested on the functioning of the executive. In pre-modern times, only a few complained about the manner in which the administration and the policing force treated the subjects of the kingdom. They asserted their power, sometimes in a ruthless manner. With the coming of the nation-state, however, this was meant to change. Technically, the citizen now has the right to object to injustice and ill treatment by the agencies of the executive. It is another matter, however, that often, because of their low caste status and the impoverishment of half the population, those that run the executive institutions continue to be feared by most people, instead of their being friends and helpers. Terrorizing people has never helped to build good relations between those that govern and those governed. This fear that was enforced in colonial functioning, unfortunately, continues to some extent, some would say to the same extent, in independent India. The third basic institution is that of the judiciary. In earlier times, kingdoms had judicial officers. Their primary function was to ensure that government orders were carried out, and those that disobeyed them were punished. Judicial officers were called upon to settle disputes, largely linked to property and to crime, and to a far lesser extent to the breaking of civil laws. Such laws were anyway few in number, since civil rights in pre-modern times were limited. However, when the free citizen replaced the subject, that citizen who was questioning or opposing authority was a new type of person and a departure from the past. This is more so, especially now, when the legal equality of all citizens is a law and is basic to social justice. The civil law, therefore, is today a significant feature of judicial activity. One hopes that both the citizen and the judiciary are fully aware of what this means to the act of governance. Colonial rule introduced a judicial system, a properly formally organized system, in an effort to facilitate the governance of the colony. But in important aspects, such as the freedom of expression to criticize authority, they did not concede this right. This freedom was curtailed by other laws, such as the law of sedition. This law was linked to the political domain in colonial times, and it continues to be so linked today. It limits the rights of the citizen, hence the legitimate demand for its removal. The question is sometimes asked as to who these three institutions are answerable to. Is it to those in authority or to the citizens whose rights they are required to protect? It's a pertinent question for our times, when citizens can be arrested and jailed indefinitely without a trial. Where there is no appeal to habeas corpus, this becomes all too common. An instance of this is the now widely spoken about Bhima Koregaon case. Citizens were arrested more than 3 years ago, yet there has been no trial. From an initial arrest of 6 persons, the number went up over the months to 16. One wonders if the case has become just a kind of convenient hold all for a range of charges and arrests. These 3 institutions, the legislative, executive, and judiciary, have to ensure the well-being of society in accordance with the Constitution. Their functioning obviously becomes more effective when citizens from all levels of society and every occupation acquire a clearer understanding of their rights under the Constitution and in law, as well as the implementation of these. This is something that we should have done at all levels of our society over the last 70 years, but we have failed to do so far. There is a need, therefore, for a more widespread familiarity with the meaning of the Constitution, as well as the rights and obligations that it documents. What are the rights and obligations of the free citizen? The rights are to be guaranteed by the state. The obligations to observe the laws of the state are met by the citizens, provided that the rights are not contradicted by these laws. Priority should be given to ensuring that every citizen has access to food, water, and shelter. This is among the primary rights. To make this more effective, the citizen should also have the right to health care, education, and employment. The economy, therefore, has to be so planned as to make these rights feasible. It is not enough to use them as election slogans or claim them as programs of benevolence. Their implementation is essential to acceptable governance. And the awareness of these rights and their implementation should be the concern of both the legislature and the executive, and their implementation the concern of the judiciary. The judiciary is central to the next set of rights relating to the social equality of all citizens, to the freedom of expression, and to social justice. These are crucial to the good relations between the citizen and the state. Fundamental to the functioning of these rights is the right to information. Citizens must know what actions and decisions are being taken in their name, and such information ensures their well-being. Proposals made by government have to be widely discussed. This requires a free media, whether the print or audiovisual, and whatever the form of expression. Critical opinion on government actions cannot automatically be regarded as anti-national. They are not invariably critical of the nation, and the government is not identical with the nation. This is a very fundamental difference that has to be understood. The government is not the nation. Dissenting ideas and actions have always been, throughout history, a continuing part of Indian civilization. What is, however, recent is their formulation as the right of the citizen. Historically, this right to free speech and expression is a new feature, essential to modern society, as is evident from the Constitution. Every citizen must know and understand these rights, And if we claim to be a democracy, then every citizen must have these rights. Here again, we have not been able to ensure them. This is something we still have to do, starting perhaps with familiarizing high school students with their right as given in the Constitution. The existence of a democratic nation is not limited to the functioning of the three institutions that I have mentioned, however important they are. Democracy demands the equality of all citizens. No category of citizens can have priority over the others, irrespective of historical practice or what is projected as cultural heritage or described as the religion of the majority. This impinges on the way in which we use the idea of identity. When historians study the creation of past and present identities of a nation over many centuries, two obvious facts emerge. One, that identities are an amalgam of many features, and two, that they therefore change over time. There is no such thing as a single unchanging identity that refers to the same community and their descendants over millennia. The ancestors of those living in the Indian subcontinent today belonged to a range of diverse identities from the earliest times. We don't know what the Harappans called themselves, as their language has not been deciphered so far. Genetic evidence, however, based on DNA analyses from skeletons, tell us that they were a mix of elements, some local to northern India and some East Iranian. Subsequent to this, the Vedic texts refer to the elite groups as Aryas, who are distinct from the many others whom they call Dasas. The linguistic, religious, and cultural difference between the two is emphasized. DNA sources provide evidence of a genetic strain from Central Asia, dating to about 4,000 years before the present, entering North India. This would be the first of many continuous migrations from Central Asia into North India up to recent times. And of course, from the north, they spread southwards into the peninsula. Ancient texts mention the arrival of peoples whom they call Shakas, Scythians, Kushans, Hunas, Huns, and Turushkas, Turks. They came in a variety of ways. Some came in small groups as pastoralists or as traders. Later, they were part of an invading army or came together with the Sufi missions. They settled in different parts of the subcontinent, and they gave rise to new religious sects, languages, and communities. And some of these grew from intermarriage and the evolving of new castes, therefore giving rise to new identities. In the early first millennium AD, the prominent religion was Buddhism. By the late first millennium, Puranic Hinduism was slowly replacing it. In the second millennium AD, Islam entered in slow stages, brought by the Arabs from the west and the Central Asian Turks from the north. Various groups of people entered from the east, bringing yet other cultures. The population that emerged out of this major interface of many groups was genetically mixed, spoke variant languages, and followed diverse religions, many of which had evolved from this intermixture. The Arabs were initially called Yavanas, a term that Indians had used for the early Hellenistic people. But later it was used for anyone from the West. There are occasions when Queen Victoria, for example, is referred to as a Yavana. They were also called Tajiks in some Sanskrit sources. They came in large numbers as traders across the Arabian Sea and settled all along the coast of Western India. The settlements gave rise to a variety of Indo-Arab cultures and religious sects, variously called Khojas, Bohras, Nawayats, Mapilas, and such like. When trade on the Indian Ocean opened up in other areas, with India playing a major role, there was further interaction between locals and migrants. Eventually, the Europeans arrived to trade, and from them, the British colonized India, but did not settle here. They were unaware of our multiple ancestry and the resulting rich culture of India. They therefore imposed on us the erroneous history that Indian society has always consisted of only two monolithic unitary religious groups, the Hindu and the Muslim, and that Indian history is the narrative of the continuous hostility between the two. In fact, however, it was the reverse. There were multiple groups constantly interacting and evolving. And this multiplicity accounted for the richness of Indian culture, of which we are today justifiably proud. In looking afresh at sources of Indian history from a non-colonial perspective, as many historians have been doing in the last 50 years, the shape of Indian society takes a very different form from that given to it by colonial definition. Religions were not unitary and monolithic. They consisted largely of a juxtaposition of communities and sects, which, as with other societies, had some periods of coexistence and some periods of localized conflict. These conflicts, however, were always at a local level, and they sorted out their relationships at this level. There were no all India organizations in pre-modern times. It was neither a society that tolerated every difference in a non-violent way, nor was it a society given to constant violent confrontations. Like all complex pre-modern societies, it had contradictions, some leading to periods of intolerance and some that were settled quite harmoniously. But these relations were in and among various communities in diverse regions. There were not conflicts between two all India religions. Basically, Indian society was many-faceted, and we have to learn to recognize and study these facets. This allowed the different groups to express themselves and to sort out their problematic relationships largely at their own level. The term Hindu comes from the Iranian Hindu, which became Indos in Greek and Al-Hind in Arabic. It is in origin a geographical term linked to the river Indus. It is the people who are living on the other side of the Indus, this side of the Indus. It is only in the 15th century AD that it came to refer to the various religions practiced in India other than Islam. Sanskrit texts of the time do not refer to the Hindu religion as such. They refer to belief systems as they also did from earlier times. And the two that are commonly referred to are the Brahman and the Shraman or the Nastic, referring to those that believed in deity, as did the Brahman, and those that did not, as in the case of the Nastic. These were said to be the prevailing two systems, where the Nastic consisted of all that did not conform to Puranic Hinduism. This dichotomy goes back to Mauryan times. The constituents of the Nastic category changed over time. Earlier, it included the Buddhists and the Jains, also known as the Shramanas, both of which rejected deity. Later, the Turushkas were added to this category. This referred to the Turks, who were by then Muslims and who did believe in a deity, Allah, but not in a Puranic deity. Therefore, they're included amongst the non-believers. This intermixing of peoples, languages, and cultures is not unique to the Indian subcontinent. It has been the historical experience of most parts of the world. We all have multiple ancestries. Their importance changes from time to time. In current times, we are aware of this, and so we have to work out a pattern that enables us to live together cooperatively with this multiplicity, as we have done in many periods of the past. It is rational and logical to choose a democratic pattern of life, since majoritarianism of any kind is opposed to democracy. And it is also opposed to the ethos of India when viewed historically. This means that no single identity, irrespective of whether it is religion or language, is to be given priority and treated as superior. The identity that we worked out for ourselves through the national movement that brought us independence was that we were Indians above all else. Every citizen was an Indian and as such had equal rights. This is our contemporary identity. The Hindus disowned the Mlecha and the Nastika, and the Muslims disowned the Kafir. But the Indian includes every citizen as Indian. This is one absolute difference between pre-modern times and our times, and this difference has to be respected. We have to understand and to honor our identity of being Indian. This identity should come with ethical values of tolerance and refraining from violence against others as democracy requires. We have not traditionally been a non-violent and tolerant society. We have had as many problems of violence and intolerance as any other society. But today's inclusiveness is an essential of citizenship and is required by our Constitution. Every Indian citizen has the same rights, the rights that I have spoken of earlier. We cannot allow one group of Indians to call for the murder and annihilation of another group of Indians who are in fact our fellow citizens. This is irrespective of what may be their religion, language, or caste. The demand for a genocide of one group of citizens by another is uncivilized in the extreme. It is only when we understand the meaning of citizenship and start implementing it that we shall arrive at understanding what it means to be the free citizens of an independent nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Thapar. And that was a timely reminder of the fact that as we approach our 75th year of independence, we need to do some thinking about what really differentiates us as an independent country of citizens. Thank you very much. It's been really a privilege to have you with us.
My
in House of
privilege to
Chamber.
be here.